Hey everyone, welcome to another Speed Secrets podcast. Today's guest is Stefan Rzadzinski. Stefan, did I get your name right?
Yeah, you got it, Stefan Rzadzinski. That sounds right to me.
Okay. Well, if it sounds right to you, I guess it's right to me. So, hey, welcome to the podcast. I know you're kind of living in kind of close to my old hometown and stuff. Little ways away, but a whole lot closer than most people. You're somewhere in the Okanagan in BC right now, right?
Yeah, I'm based in Penticton near the Area 27 racetrack. I'm up and down to your hometown in Vancouver all the time. It's just a 3 or 4 hour drive, which I think in our terms is pretty close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it out here. I was originally born and raised in Edmonton, which is just a great city, and then I've obviously had this opportunity out here in BC and jumped on it a few years ago and haven't really looked back.
I love that area. It's just it's gorgeous around there, and I've not had a chance. My plan was this year to go to Area 27 and check out that track because I hear it's amazing, and obviously with travel restrictions and stuff, I didn't make it. So hopefully next year I will.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. It's certainly it's an amazing facility. You've got tons of the old school elevation style corners, which is, I think, as a driver, something we all really love. It's something I really, each lap around there, I find myself challenged. It's one of the toughest tracks I've been on in regards to putting together a full lap, which I think is also another challenge that we really enjoy. So if anyone ever gets the opportunity or is from the area and has a chance to take it out there are ways to get on the track, and I'd highly recommend it.
What's the length of the track?
4.83 kilometers.
4.83 kilometers. For those not in metric system, that's a little over 3 miles.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Yeah. So hopefully we'll get together there. You and I kind of bump into each other every now and then somewhere at some track. I can't remember where last time it was, Daytona or Trois-Rivières or somewhere like that. So somewhere we bump into each other. But hey, Stefan, I wanted to ask you, one of the cool things about your whole driving racing career is you've driven like everything, like all sorts of people kind of go, well, is he an open wheel guy or a GT guy? Yeah, you're kind of everything. And one of the things that you did was you went and competed in the Race of Champions, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That was a really, really cool moment for me, and certainly something I won't forget anytime soon.
Can you, I mean, some listeners might go, what is the Race of Champions? Can you kind of explain what it is? And then I guess tell the story a little bit about how you got there and what it was like racing against some of the best drivers in the world.
Yeah, that was a super cool experience for me. I remember sitting in my office in Edmonton in the middle of winter, and I applied on this Facebook contest, the Race of Champions, which is this all-star game for motorsports, essentially just drivers from NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, sports cars, rally, kind of all over the place, from all around the world to come and compete, because that year it was in Miami. And all of a sudden I was sitting at my desk a few weeks later, and I got an email saying, hey, you're one of the 10 finalists, because they were sending someone who wasn't, one of the stars to go and compete against these guys. And I made it into the top 10, but they required you to go and gather votes. So over the next 3.5 days, I basically launched campaign. I think I texted every person I've ever had my phone, even if I didn't talk to them for years, even if they didn't have me in their phone. And I kind of said, hey, this is really important to me. I'd really appreciate if you took the time to just give me a quick vote. And from there, the floodgates really opened. I think it was 3.5 days, the voting period that they left it open for. And I think I may have slept for 3.5 hours in total in those 3 days, because I was very determined to not let the opportunity pass me by. I was certainly felt like one of those surreal, once-in-a-lifetime moments. When you grow up in Edmonton, and it's not really, it's a great city, but it's not necessarily a motorsports haven for professional motorsports. And to get a chance to race and compete against my heroes was not something I was going to pass lightly. So I did everything I could. The city got behind me amazingly. The media, everyone kind of really rallied around me. So I was really thankful to get that opportunity. And then obviously I didn't want to show up and just place and just be there. Obviously the experience was surreal. I shared a car ride to the track with Sebastian Vettel and Pascal Verlaine, which at the time was something really, really cool.
Wow.
For me personally, just to have a chat about skiing with Sebastian Vettel. We didn't talk about racing at all. We just talked about skiing. And I wasn't even a skier at the time.
So that's cool.
But yeah, it was cool. I had a chance to go and race against, I think my heats, I went up against Kyle Busch. I lost by a tenth to Kyle Busch. And then ended up beating Alex Rossi, who won the Indy 500 the year prior, and Scott Speed. So for me, that was a nice moment of kind of validation.
Yeah. So I got to ask, you show up there and there's guys like Rossi and Vettel and can't remember who the rally stars were that year. Was
Solberg was there. Pieter Solberg was awesome. Tom Kristensen was there, not from rallying, but there were definitely some star-studded line. Couthard was there. Massa was there. Montoya. There's a lot of good guys.
So was there a moment of kind of like, whoa, what the heck am I doing here? Or was it just, I'm here to go for it, like I've got nothing to lose? Like, how did you manage that pressure, the expectations, that part of it, I guess?
I think it was definitely a huge mental exercise. I definitely felt with, even from getting that wave of attention going to get there, I felt a little bit like heightened. I knew I was ready for whatever it was. Like it just felt like the right time. This was just as I was kind of transitioning, or this was actually the catalyst to transition into moving out to BC full time. I think that moment was actually what really sunk it for me. And so I went there and I knew what I had to do. I just knew I had to stay focused and deliver. Obviously, it was just quite cool being around all these guys who I grew up watching. So trying to temper that was not easy, especially I think I was 23 or just turned 24 at the time, which I know, it's not a young guy. There's younger guys in Formula One, but just coming from where I came from and the environment from minus 30 in Edmonton to plus 20 in Miami and around all your stars, it's a very big culture shock in a time where you're not really driving. But I think I was really proud of how I was able to manage that. And I knew when the race day came, so we had Saturday, it was the individual competition, which I was not a part of. And then on Sunday, it was the group competition where I was with James Hinchcliffe, and we competed against the other countries. So I had a chance to kind of see how the day unfolded the day before, but obviously don't get to practice because I didn't get to drive. And then on Sunday, I just had this self-belief that, these are just guys driving, turning a steering wheel just like me. And if I put together a couple laps here, I'm going to be able to put together a result. It's never been any different in any race I've been in. These guys make mistakes too, so put everyone in a bit of an uncomfortable environment, and everyone's got a fair shot. And I genuinely believe that. And there's actually a moment on video when my one friend Dennis Sieb, who was with me on that trip, he was having a video I didn't know, and I just told him. I walked out and I said, "I'm ready," and it went really well.
That's cool. I mean, because you could go in there and be just awestruck by all these guys, or you could go in there and kind of go, well, look, I'm here just to drive. So it sounds like that's kind of what you did. And you're hopping into cars that you've never driven before, and you just really have to go and immediately get a feel for things, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You get on the practice day on Friday, you get a chance to test a bunch of different cars, not all of them because they just don't have time in a day. But you get a chance to see the lap. It's kind of like a loop through a stadium. It was in Marlin Stadium. And you don't know if you're going to get to race that car because things change. And it's a spectator event, obviously. So there's certain priorities and things that get set up first. And luckily, I was in 3 cars that I really enjoyed driving. And so I don't remember the name of the one car. The Vool? No, it was the Vool from Mexico. That was the first one. I lost in that one to Kyle Busch by a bit. I was mad at myself because I made a mistake. I think I could have had him otherwise. And then in the NASCAR, which was very similar actually to the NASCAR Canada car I drove, so I felt a little bit more comfortable maybe in that one. And then I raced in the Rally ROC, their buggy, which to me was the most fun. So it was three completely different cars, and I was racing against Scott Speed in that one, and for some reason that one went really well for me. So I was pretty pleased, but you're just jumping into all sorts of stuff, and again, it's just you have to kind of figure it out.
So being adaptable is not a bad thing there. So hey, you kind of got me thinking there. Like, you're talking about guys who've won the Indy 500, Le Mans, Rally Championships, Formula One races, World Championships, all that kind of stuff, and then Kyle Busch, a NASCAR driver, and there are people that kind of go, NASCAR, all they do is they turn left, right? How good can they be? I have spent time with NASCAR drivers, and I've coached some, and I am blown away by their ability. What was Kyle Busch like that way?
Kyle and Kurt were noticeably taking it the most seriously.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah.
100%, undoubtedly. The only other one that seemed maybe as kind of like race car driver crazy, which was, I thought, awesome, was Vettel, because he just stayed on European time. Like, he didn't leave European time the entire time he was there. He was like up at 3 or 4 in the morning going for runs, and then he'd go and do the event in the day and then go like immediately to bed. So he didn't even adjust his schedule for the week he was there. He just wanted to stay on European time, which was funny. But Kyle and Kurt, you can definitely tell, like, they were the guys they were taking notes on times on the practice day. They knew who was quick. They knew who had the chance. They knew the cars. Like, you could see why they're successful. They are intense, and they took it seriously. They didn't let up. They did not take it as a fun weekend. They had something to prove for sure. I for sure think they had something to prove to all the other guys too. So it was cool to see. It was cool to see how everyone worked. A guy like David Coulthard is he can walk around and say anything, and he's hilarious. But the NASCAR guys, the Busch brothers, were certainly intense. They were great guys.
And who ended up winning that year?
I honestly can't even remember. I think once we were out, I just stopped paying attention. Didn't care anymore.
Typical race driver, right? Who cares?
I was disappointed that we were knocked out, so I tuned out. I honestly can't. I remember. I think Germany did not win that year. They had won all the years prior, and they didn't. Oh, it was Solberg's team won it.
Okay.
So I believe it was like the Scandinavian. I think it was him and Kristensen. I believe they won it.
Oh, okay. Huh.
In the team competition. I can't remember who won individual. I think it may have been Solberg as well.
Yeah. Often those rally guys they're amazing, but they're in their car control and ability to adapt, and obviously driving a rally car through the woods is all about adapting to, and you don't really know what you've got, right? So in some ways they have an advantage, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think one of the finalists was actually in a Rallycross Lights car, so I think it was even more up their alley. But full respect to those guys. They're madmen and women, and they can adapt really well. And it's just really cool to see from all the different disciplines, people being a little bit outside their comfort zone. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the experience.
And, to me, the most interesting part is just how you manage those expectations. Because, many years ago, I drove an IndyCar in Vancouver at the very first IndyCar race that was held in Vancouver. And, the local, my hometown, I'm not going to say fans because I'm not sure I had any fans, but I had, supporters and a lot of people, and they were like, oh, great, a Vancouver driver is going to win this. And, so I know that you going there and having had so much support from the Edmonton community and, Canadians, because I voted for you. And, there are expectations when you get there. And to be honest, some of them are pretty unrealistic. So it's interesting how you manage that. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I think in many ways it was, it felt like that moment was like a culmination of a lifelong dream, right? You dream of racing against these guys. You dream of being in these kinds of moments. So in many ways, having that actually present itself in reality was almost like mentally, it just made sense to me. It just felt right. And I've had a few of those moments, even doing my first laps at Monaco last year, racing the Jaguar I-PACE, like the first lap around the Monaco circuit, even though it was, called half the circuit, not the full circuit. It was the Formula E circuit we raced. I just took the first lap to just take it in, and then I started to get to work. Because there's a few of those moments I think they're important to appreciate kind of the gravity of them. And for me, obviously, again, coming from where I came from, those things sort of, they mean a lot. And I think they're really important. So I really enjoyed I thrive in those moments. I find in the moments where it seems like the odds are stacked against me, I just have always tended to overexceed. So I'm really proud of that.
That's cool. And I want to get into that, the whole, electric car thing and then the different cars you've driven and everything. But the last thing about Race of Champions, do you stay in touch? I mean, does Sebastian call you up and say, hey, dude, let's go skiing this weekend?
No, I was too nervous to change my phone number out. The reality of that story is, again, my friend Dennis, who is with me, he's a business guy at Edmonton, and he was just a big motorsports fan, and he was great. He knew where I'd be focused, and he was smart enough to look up every driver and find out things outside of racing that they enjoyed. So he helped me break the ice many times, and that's how the conversation with Vettel about skiing got going, because my buddy knew of a Blue River heli skiing resort, and Vettel was super interested in that. He was like, "Oh, that's just so far." I don't keep in touch with too many of them. Obviously, James Hinchcliffe, I've known him since I was probably 17 or 18 years old, so stay in touch with him every once in a while, but otherwise, yeah, I don't bug those guys too much. But having said that, even Tom Kristensen and a few of the other guys I have spoken to since. So it was a really cool experience, and just having the chance to, even off the track, mingle with those guys, see what they're all about, and you just realize these are just they're just humans. So yeah, it was really cool.
I think that was a big kind of I'm going to say an aha moment for me in my career was when there was a point where you're up against these guys like, Andretti's and stuff like that, and you're going, wait a minute, they're just humans. They're no different. But it's easy to kind of get into that, they're superhuman, but they're not. So
no, it's certainly, I think I look back on that myself at that time, and I knew obviously I had the ability, but I probably didn't have maybe the maturity or the self belief probably that I do now. That's probably come a long way. So I look back at myself at that point, and I really do see a kid. I feel like a lot has changed over the last few years in a positive way. But I was really happy I could go and get it done and kind of prove that I didn't let the noise kind of interfere with me performing at that event, and that's something I definitely pride myself on.
That's cool. And you've driven open wheel cars. You've driven. I remember seeing you. I think you were at Trois Rivera the one year I was there when you were driving one of the Nissan Micra Cup cars.
Yeah.
There. So you've driven little showroom stock cars. You've driven open wheel cars. You've driven GT cars, Porsches, and all that kind of stuff. And then you drove the electric Jaguar thing in that series. Talk to us a little bit about that, and maybe how you've had to adapt. Oh, yeah, and you've driven like NASCAR Cup cars and CASCAR and stuff like that. So talk about adapting, and maybe I think some people would love to hear a little bit of what's it like going from a Porsche GT car to a NASCAR type car to an electric Jaguar.
Yeah, it's there's certainly a vast variety of differences when it comes to many things, even how the brake pedal feels, the steering feels, the seating position, your vision. All these things really they're very different across the board. I think the one thing for me that I probably subconsciously look for is number one, the feeling on the brakes. So understanding the brake pedal and the limitations of the brakes. Like a NASCAR is going to brake a lot different than the LMP3 prototype car. It's going to be very different than a Formula car. And so trying to get to the limit of the braking is something I look for. Not necessarily pushing the brake zone right away, but just understanding how quickly something slows down, whether the car locks up, how it locks up. A Porsche Cup car is much different than driving a GT3 full spec race car because it has ABS and one doesn't. But the brake pedal is something I definitely pay a lot of attention to. It's something that gives you the confidence that you can start going faster and faster in the corners. And then once you kind of have the idea of the brakes, I find from there, then it's a matter of saying, all right, well, the tires, there are differences in tires, of course, and grip level, but you're always trying to maximize the limit of the tire that you got. So just because some have more and some have less doesn't necessarily, doesn't really mean too much. So if you can start getting towards the limit of the tire, you can get to the limit of the car fairly quickly, I find. The steering wheel just points the car, and once you know the limit of the tire, you're really able to just start pushing it more and more, whether it's got whether you can pull 3 Gs in the corner or one. One is probably a little bit easier to get to when you're dealing with 1 G of force, like maybe in the Jaguar with street tires, than 3 or more G in some of the Formula cars and prototype cars that are out there, where it takes a bit more bravery. But I think once you have an understanding of how the tire grips, and then it's much easier for me, at least personally, to find that limit and try and get to the up to speed as fast as possible. Because as you know, and I'm sure you've been in many situations where you've just been thrown in the fire, which happened to me plenty of times, where you don't have much time to figure it out, and you just got to go racing right away. So there isn't 2 test days to prep. You might have 20 or 30 minutes, if that.
So a couple things there. One is some drivers they're able to sense that a tire has more longitudinal grip, so braking acceleration versus lateral grip, so cornering grip. And other tires tend to be more the other way. Like there are some tires that have more cornering grip than they do braking grip, or more braking grip than they have cornering grip. Is that something that you consciously go looking for and kind of go, oh yeah, I need to see, I really need to use the tires in the corners here and not rely on in the brake zone? Or man, this thing really stops and these tires grip. And obviously it's vehicle weight and brakes and all that kind of stuff, but at some point it comes down to the tire grip.
To add to that, I think certain cars have certain characteristics that respond to certain things better, like the Porsche Cup cars for sure. You can brake deep. It maybe doesn't feel like it's slowing down the best, but the cornering speeds you can carry with the cars with huge angles of camber are quite surprising when you first jump in it. It's like, oh, there's actually more here in the corner than I expected. So for sure, I felt that. Like in the Jaguar I-PACE with street tires, stopped really well. Didn't quite have the cornering grip, but it could stop really well. You could be really good on the brakes in those things, and like you could almost brake it like you would, not quite like a prototype car, but that sort of idea. The thing will slow down really well on the brakes, but in the corners you just have to overslow it, or what would feel overslow it, just because it needed that. So it's not something you probably consciously look for, but actually, when you're reviewing data after the session, you probably do. After your first session in the car, I think I always find, like, all right, where am I leaving something on the table here? And a big part of it comes into, all right, like maybe I need to roll more entry speeds because I haven't had a moment on the entry. I haven't even scared myself there yet. So maybe that's part of the process a little bit, but you do try and figure out which sections of the corner obviously you're leaving something behind, and if you haven't explored one area, it's tough to know. So I would say experimentation is definitely a big part of the process.
And I've had the experience of somebody says, hey, get in my car and go do a couple laps, and you go out and second lap you're quicker than the person that owns or drives the car, and people are like, how do you know? How are you able to sense the limits of the car that quickly? And I'm curious your thoughts on that, because again, your career has been all about adapting to cars quickly. And how do you sense that? I mean, you touched on this, like went in the corner, I didn't scare myself. Is that kind of your approach? Is I'm going to go a little faster until I scare myself and then back off, or continue to scare myself at that level? Or, how do you sense that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure there's a bit of you have to go and one thing is for sure, if you just keep driving it the same way, you're not going to find any lap time. I know that for sure. If you don't make a change in your driving and the car is relatively the same, the odds of you finding lap time are, very, very marginal, especially if it's a circuit or a car and all those things. So, um, just again having been put in these positions so many times, like the Race of Champions, where you don't really have much practice and you jump in, like there isn't much choice but to kind of go over your limit a little bit and then bring it back. Having
Yeah.
said that, I'm very comfortable with my ability to just go just slightly over and bring it back. But I think I don't really have too many issues with that usually, and that's for sure just a developed sense of what the limit in the tire is. Certain cars you can keep going more, but might feel unnerving and too fast initially. You settle into it and say, actually, the car is stable at this speed, and maybe that was just a mental barrier that you have to get around. So I think for me, you talk about it a lot in your Speed Secrets books and your inner Speed Secrets. It's just you're trying to find that state of flow, and if you are calm, I think you can really sense a lot of what the car is doing, and whether you're at the limit or not. And it gives you a bit of that ability to go a little farther than you would if you're stressed out or if you're impatient. And I think the red mist is something very real. It's something I see in a lot of drivers I coach. They get so excited, they're going so fast. Even guys who are getting closer towards my lap times. But that final bit of speed comes from calming that down and really finding that sense of, all right, is this the limit? Like almost being able to talk yourself through it while you're driving around the lap. And it's something that I know is something a lot of professional drivers, great drivers do. They have the mental capacity to not be stressed out by the situation. They're not just thinking about the corner they're driving. They're able to process it a little bit more.
You bring up a really, really good point there, I think. To me, that ability to get up to speed quickly, there's kind of two things. One is that, well, I can sense the tires and the grip and the brakes and the limits of the car. But the other part of it is having that trust or confidence in yourself to know that I can go a little beyond and I can still bring it back. And, typically if I've gone out and trying to get up to speed quickly, it's like, okay, I'm just going to overdrive this car a little bit and then I'll dial it back. And it sounds like that's kind of your same approach in a lot of ways. But you have to have that trust, that confidence in yourself that you're able to do that. So
yeah, it's not something I usually like working with my students on.
yeah.
Because many times you see it where if there is someone who's overdriving, you just want them to calm down because as I'm sure you've seen many times, you're like, I know this is going to end really badly but the student might not know if they're overdriving, and that's what the end result could be, a crash. So I think it's an important skill to go just over, maybe call it 5-10% over what the limit is on the car, and then bringing it back. I don't say it's going 20 or 30% over, or always flirting with it in dangerous areas.
Yeah.
I've seen that from drivers who are definitely can find the speed pretty quickly, and I'll certainly say the drivers who are able to drive almost over the limits early on, even with less experience, they're generally can be fairly fast, but of course there's more wrecks usually that happen for those drivers as well. But they might learn faster too. So I've seen both sides. I've seen merit to both sides.
And it's, as a coach, I'm sure you've had this experience where, like, if you see somebody that overdrives the car, but then immediately starts bringing it back, you go, oh, okay, I'm good with that driver doing that. If somebody overdrives and they overdrive and they overdrive and they overdrive and they overdrive and they're not like making any adjustments, that's when you go, whoa, we got to stop this, right?
Like, just call them into the pits, like, get into this, like, you're gonna crash. I think the one mistake that I think I see the most in call it amateur drivers or even high performance drivers is like they just keep trying to find the time in the brake zone Like even if they're not beneficial, like certain slow corners, I laugh because I look like I slow down way earlier than them, and then I just drive off the corner better than them. But because they're so obsessed with carrying the entry speed, that like you still have to think about what the corner is you're facing and what's the best way to get around it. And a lot of guys that just attack. Um, that's the most common error I see. And as funny as it is, the short stock Micra Cup was the best example of that for me. I remember so many times you could almost bait a guy into making a mistake because you'd break early, slightly earlier than them. They'd break super late. They'd be all attacking on the entry, and then you just drive away on the exit. And sometimes they even fell off the track when they did that. So,
and of course, Stefan, they said that you had a cheater motor, right? Because you got off the corner better. You passed them down the straightaway, of course.
Yeah, all 98 horsepower.
Yeah, but you had 98.1 horsepower. That was the difference.
Exactly. So it's I think it's really cool when guys can get to the limit, but for sure they need to have the capacity to, guys and girls obviously, when they can dial it back just a little bit to find that consistency, because for sure it's no fun having someone who's going off the track a bunch.
Yeah. And I would say, when I look at kind of my own driving still and other drivers, drivers who are really good, it's interesting that often they break a little earlier or lighter than the driver that's trying to break the track record. And then there's one or two places where they break a little bit later. And that's usually, it's kind of that old classic thing of, they drive the slow corners too fast and the fast corners too slow. And it's kind of the same kind of thing with some of the brake zones. They try to brake late in the wrong places, and then they brake early in the places that should brake late. So it's more the strategy, right?
It is, and it's obviously that's why you do track walks. That's why you study. That's why you're prepared beforehand. You're trying to limit the amount of things you're doing on the weekend and being as prepared as possible. That was what racing junior formula cars at a high level taught me. Trying to get prepared for IndyCar was you are running you get the shortest amount of track time because you're not the show. You still have to practice and then qualify, and then you're racing right away. So if you weren't on it from lap one, you had a really tough time catching up. If you're just taking your time learning this and that, that was, that's to me what the biggest thing the junior formula cars taught is being prepared. It wasn't until later on in life that I probably recognized, hey, like, you probably have to pay attention to more than just your driving when you're talking about preparation, and that was something probably learned the hard way. But being prepared at the racetrack, having an idea, mental picture, visual laps, visualization. Obviously, you talk about that a lot. These are the tools that you use to just try and minimize the time you need to learn a new track or a new car or whatever it is. And once you're comfortable with that, it definitely gives you the confidence to jump in many cars and just perform at the limit right away.
So you reminded me of a question that I like to ask, and that is what's been the biggest aha moment in your driving career? Like there was a time, could have been when you were karting, could be an open wheel, could be whenever. There was a time where you're like, oh, now I get it. Like this makes the difference. I was going to say, has there been a time? I know there has been, because every driver has that moment. But what was it for you?
There's plenty of things, but I think the one thing, especially, I'll call it something even more recent. Like the one thing that once you kind of have an idea of driving a car at the limit, that you really do have to hone in on and pay attention to is the car working for you in the way you need it to? And it's not something I like getting into too much with more amateur drivers, because for the most part, like, there's work to do on the driving, and until you get towards the limit of the driving, a lot of people obsess over things on the car. I'm like, why are you spending time on this? Like, go drive, go learn to drive. Don't spend money on the car and do all these changes where you absolutely have no need for it. And so I just see it all the time, and I'm sure you do as well. But on the flip side of that, my aha moment was definitely like just really starting to work with guys on setups and then doing, certain, just taking swings and then realizing, oh, wow, I'm going so much faster. This is so much easier just because the car is working for me now and I'm not trying to fight it. So having the awareness to, if something's not working, something doesn't feel right, try to understand why, try and understand what can you make better so that this can be easier. Because I've definitely, I was probably someone who fought cars that didn't handle to my liking, and I probably didn't pay enough attention, and I just tried to rely on my talent too much. And that didn't help me. That didn't help me. In the end, like, if you are not aware of the things that can actually make your car better, or if you're not willing to experiment, I think the experimentation and the learning and the practice of that can be huge. That's huge in taking that next step from a guy who's a really fast, called amateur driver, to then taking the jump in towards the professional realm, like being able to say what the car needs. And it takes time and experience. I wouldn't say that you can just jump into a brand new car and know exactly what it needs, because there's usually a way for you to drive it better, and you need to adapt that first. But being aware of what the car needs is huge. Like we probably found 4 seconds on the track here this fall because I found the car was in area 27 because the car was too stiff. The track was cold, the tires weren't getting any grip. The thing felt like it was skating across the pavement, and I just went in there and turned all the compression down, softened the thing right up, and all of a sudden the car's going 4 seconds faster on the track. It's crazy.
Wow.
Like, you're not driving harder, you're not doing anything better. The car just works way better. So I find those things can be easily missed by a lot of people.
So it's helping the car help you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, as a professional, what percentage of the time do you spend now working on your driving versus working on getting the next drive? Because it's a tough business, and it's not a sport that it's not like you can take your tennis balls and tennis racket and go to the court and just hit the ball around, right? It costs a lot of money. It's not easy. It's not accessible. But how much time do you actually spend working on your driving?
I think it ranges depending on the time of year, obviously, and the way things are going. I think I was certainly someone who spent almost all his time because I you hear the story all the time, and it's not something I don't like the rhetoric of it, but you had no money. Well, yeah, sure. So many people didn't have money, and I was one of them. But that's just the way the sport is. It's not fun, but it's the way it is. So I spent definitely not abnormal, but a huge part of my early years really, really working on trying to find the budget and finding the ride and all that stuff. So that became like 80% of my free time. The other probably 20 with my driving. I for sure know I was in my younger years. You'd show up on the weekend, and you, especially when you're a bit more of probably a fragile state when you're a youngster, if you haven't developed mental strength yet, you don't know if you're really ready. Like, you worked so hard to get here, but is everything else in place? And so that's something when I was younger, I definitely spent more time on that just because was sink or swim, right? You're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And, for sure the last few years and working at a track, being able to drive more, now having my own karting team with 2 other drivers, Remo, Ruscitti, and Scott Hargrove. I'm really fortunate I get the chance to, if I want to drive, if I need to drive, like to stay sharp, I can do that. So I'm spending a lot more time on those things, just kind of quietly, just staying sharp, whether it's on the sim, which I like to a point. I love using a shifter cart. That's something I didn't grow up with. For me, that's a great training tool, or even like a standard tag cart. So they're really good training tools, fitness tools, and just keeping you sharp and aware. So I know I'm going around at how much am I spending, but more now than I used to, for sure. Just because not necessarily that I have the luxury, but I know it's important, and I'm maybe less panicked about what's next. I don't have a ride lined up. I don't have anything set in stone for the future, but I feel like it's more important for me to be prepared mentally and as a driver, and just being sharp that way. So I definitely spend more time now than I used to, because that's just, I think it's important.
Yeah, I kind of smiled a little bit as you were talking about that, because it was like, I remember times when I'd get to the track and I'd actually be worn out. I'd be worn out because I'd been working so hard at getting there, and it didn't help my performance. I know that. So
no, definitely. I think my growth as a driver, person, all of that has come more from the mental side in the last year than anything, and just being able to say no to things, to kind of be in more control of what direction you're going, which for me has led me to be a little less strung out, a little less. I think as racing drivers, we're like dogs. Like, we throw a ball and there's 10 balls thrown, we want to go chase them all. and,
yep.
And I think for me, I'm trying to be prepared and ready for the right opportunity, the right thing. I've made the mistakes. I've done it the hard way, for sure. But I'm only 27. I know I'm not a young 16-year-old anymore, but I still feel like definitely my best years of driving are ahead of me, not behind me. And having a bit more experience, having a bit more maturity, I think, is certainly going to help me for whatever is next. So I'm spending time on that. Honestly, if there's something I've spent most time, talk about driving, yes, but just the mental preparation and being using every situation in life to be that person you want to be, helps me, I think, in the car. I know it's helped me already.
That's very cool. And I know that you're doing a lot more coaching and everything, which kind of changes your perspective on a lot of things, right? And so as a coach with a driver that has your experience, what's your one piece of advice for listeners of this show? Your one speed secret you'd give drivers? Putting you on the spot here. Sorry.
Yeah, for me, definitely, just keep believing and do not give up. I know that sounds cliche in so many ways, but I think I was dealt so many cards where I could have just said, you know what, I'm done, and I was very, very close. I was working at one race of champions was happening. I was done university, and I was working at a software job, and at that point, my ambitions of being involved in motorsports and racing, they weren't looking too hot until I got an email that came across my desk, and then all of a sudden, I realized, I was obsessed with this. I couldn't just let it go, and it really sparked me to, I'm not ready to quit here. I need to keep going. And so, just because it didn't work out when I was younger, and I now fully admit that, and I'm happy it hasn't. I was not ready for the responsibility that comes with some of those big opportunities at that time. I would not have been. I would have failed. I would have sunk. I know now, having a different place mentally, that I would not have been prepared for the challenges that come with, and the pressure and everything else that comes with it. It's something you need to be prepared for, and I think I see it a lot. I think we both see it a lot in drivers who get thrown in too early and things don't go right, or whatever happens, and then it's not necessarily their fault. They just maybe weren't ready to deal with everything that happens at those levels. And so for me, I'm very thankful, actually, that it has worked out the way it has. It's maybe been the hard way, but I think for me, it's certainly made me a stronger character, and mentally much more prepared for whatever's next. So all those difficulties and those hard times, especially for young drivers, I think knowing that all those hard lessons and getting taken out by your teammate and getting put in the wall and not knowing how you're going to make it to the next race, like, those things build your character. They do. They feel like the worst thing in the world at the time. You got your pillowcase full of tears when you get home sometimes, but And, those are the things that end up making you, I think, a champion one day.
Stefan, there's a lot of self-awareness going on there, and that's amazing that you're at that point, and congrats to you for that. And I can take the, sort of keep believing and don't give up. It applies, I guess, to the overall big picture of your driving career, whether it's you're trying to be the next Formula One world champion or whether you just want to go and have fun on track days. But it also applies to, I want to get through that corner quicker. Like you can take it down to a tiny little thing and just keep believing, keep doing stuff, keep adapting, and don't give up. You will find a way to get through that corner and, do it better and make it feel better than ever before.
Yeah, and I think that's something we all, as drivers in any level, we're always looking to find that little bit more, to drive in our subconscious, to reach a little deeper. And for me, it's all, well, not all, but a majority of it comes down to your mental capacity and your mental abilities. I think the reason guys like Lewis Hamilton and Scott Dixon are great, or they're able to go within themselves, perhaps even further than the other guys, and they're able to ask themselves those questions. And like you said, every single corner, every single thing, how much further can it go? And I'm just a big believer that a huge part of that is mental.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other steps need to be there, but having the ability to push yourself farther is incredibly important.
Stefan, how do listeners follow you? How do they see what you're doing and get a hold of you if they want to?
Yeah, I'm on all the typical social media ones: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. My handle is RZAD or RZAD Racing, depending on what country you're from.
Yeah.
And I have a website, RZAD Racing, so RZAD Racing. I'm pretty much everything on there. I'm not too big of a poster. I generally have been keeping a bit of more of a lower profile, just out of preference. But I definitely, when there's racing things going on, I definitely post about it, and I enjoy kind of cruising through and seeing what the latest is in the world as well.
Well, I'll put those links in the show notes as well. But hey, thanks for being on the show and sharing your experiences. This has been fantastic. And my big takeaway is just your level of understanding of yourself, your self-awareness, and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and how you've managed that and your mental game. So again, congrats to you. Hey, I got some advice for you. Keep believing and don't give up.
Thank you. I will not. I definitely I can't wait for what's next.
Yeah. Hey, so keep having fun out there, and we'll see you at the track.
See you there. Thanks so much, Ross.
Want to be a better racer? There's nothing better than outdriving and outsmarting other competitors on the track. It's really all about your racecraft. The passing, being passed, race starts, restarts, it's all racecraft. And it's a skill and mindset that can be learned and improved. Ross has a webinar for that. It's the Improve Your Racecraft webinar, in which he shares strategies, tactics, etiquette, rules, and the mental mindset that makes some racers better than the rest. And those are the racers who win more often. And you'll find some of Ross's passion for wheel-to-wheel racing. The Improve Your Racecraft webinar was conducted live and recorded, and now can be yours to view, review, and learn from over and over again. Buy it once, and it's yours forever, so you can refer to it whenever and wherever you want to. Go to speedsecrets.com/webinars to download Improve Your Racecraft.